called demonstrative pronouns. That's a fancy word you've probably never heard before, but it comes from the word demonstrate. When I demonstrate something, I'm pointing or showing. So these are pronouns that are meant to show you something. You've heard these before if you've been keeping up with Alpha with Angela. Like lesson 1. What does she say when she picks up tus bus? What does she say? She says, "Ti esti tutto." And what does that mean? What is this? Yeah. Tutto. That's a demonstrative pronoun. This. So a demonstrative pronoun is that and this. A near demonstrative is this. I'm referring to something close by, near demonstrative. I'm demonstrating something nearby, this mouse. Or I would say, that car is a far demonstrative. This, that. Now, what's a pronoun? You've had a couple pronouns already. Which pronouns have you learned? What about the personal pronouns? Right, so ego, I, autos, aute, he, her. Pronouns. So what does a pronoun do? It's right, yeah. It stands in place of its predicate. So that's another fancy grammatical term you've probably heard already. So if I were to say, Stephanie is over there and she is writing notes. She is the personal pronoun. The predicate is Stephanie. The pronoun stands in place of something. And so we'll see the same thing with these demonstrative pronouns. This is a Greek book. This stands in for the predicate Greek book. Great. Any questions? That was all review so far.
In the plural, with these, in English we say these, right? These sisters or these brothers.
Yeah.
Even though this here,
yeah.
Plural, we say
exactly. These. Yeah, this mouse, these books, that car, those cars. Yeah, we've got plural as well. So in English, right, our pronouns are not, our demonstrative pronouns are not gendered in English, but that's not the case in Greek. As with everything, there is gender. So, before we get started, our demonstrative pronouns, check out this point here, agrees in gender, number, and case. What does that mean?
And then they are singular. And they are nominative and genitive and others.
Dative and accusative. Yes. Right, exactly. Because just as he in Greek can be autos, autou, auto, auton, and then oi, on, ois, us, throwing in the ends. Our pronouns as well are going to change so that they agree with their predicate. That is that whatever, if the predicate is singular and masculine and nominative, then the near demonstrative or far demonstrative will be singular, masculine, and nominative. And like I said, you've been hearing these already, even if you didn't know it. When Angela says "ti esti tutto," she's saying, "What is this?" So let's go through these right now. We're in chapter 8 if you want to follow along, but I've just kind of copy and pasted it out of the book. Yeah. Yep, this and that. Yeah, there are other kinds of pronouns, like the personal pronouns, and we'll get some more later on. But right now we're just doing demonstrative, this and that. So, near demonstrative, this, in the nominative, is hutas. You got a little rough breathing mark there on the top, so hutas. And this is the one that you've probably heard enough with Angela, "Ti esti tutto." Yeah, "Ti esti tutto," she says. What is that? And you've seen all of these endings. I know that some of you, as you're reading, you may not be registering the endings or thinking about the endings, but I promise you you'll learn them because they're not going away, and you're just going to keep seeing them over and over again. What are these endings? Us, oo, o, on. We've got that little Yoda subscript right there showing us that it's in the dative. So this is all very familiar. Feminine, a, ace, a, ain. The neuter, ah, oo, o, ah. Right, so the endings, you've already seen them, just the same as everything you've learned. What's different now is the stem. In the nominative, hutas, and then tautu, tauto, tauton. Feminine, haute in the nominative, and then tautes, taute, tautain. Then neuter, tuto, tutu, tuto, tuta. Tuta, tutu, tuto, tuta. So after you spend some time seeing these, they'll start to sink in. Does this look pretty easy so far? Because these endings, everything you've learned these endings already. All you're learning is a new stem, and they do exactly the same thing they do in English: stand in for something close by, and standing in for something far away. Now, when we're thinking about these, we should also note that they're not just referring to something spatially far away or spatially close by. You know, what did you might be reading the New Testament and you'll hear Jesus say, in that day. He's not talking about a spatial object. He's talking about a day that is far away. And Jesus will use the far demonstrative in tate mera. So in that day, something far away. All right. Cool. I'm just going to keep going like this, and then we'll see them in sentences, and we'll just keep reading them, and you'll start to understand them. Great. So plural, very very similar. Look at this. We've got the same stem going on right here, but what's changed?
Yeah.
Just the ending, and you've seen these endings already. Oi, on, ois, us. I own, ice, as. A own, ois, ah. So this is just a combination of what you've learned with just a new stem. All right, so how do we use these? How do they appear in sentences? Oh, first off, before that, so this is the near demonstrative this, and then we've got the far demonstrative that on the next page. Far demonstrative is very easy to recognize. Ikai, that's your stem. Ikainos, ikainu, ikaino, ikainon. Same endings, nothing different there. Oi, own, ois, us, ace, ain, I own, ice, as, and then neuters all the same as well. The only thing that's different now is you've got a new stem, ikainos, and that is talking about that. Far demonstrative, far away. When you say in English that car, exact same thing. Yeah, referring to something that is not close by, but far away. Are any questions with that so far?
Plural is then what, those?
Yep, exactly. This, these, that, those. Same thing. All right, so let's talk about how we use this in sentences. So there was a lot of text here, so I just wanted to read it directly from the book. If you want to open up Croy to page 42. And just follow along with my reading. This is point 50, syntax of the demonstrative. Again, what does syntax mean? Yeah, word order. Like how words are combined in a sentence to make them make sense. Okay, so demonstratives are words that specify or point out a person or a thing. They may be used with nouns as adjectives or by themselves as pronouns. What does that mean? So I could say that car, and so I'm pointing out a pronoun, or I'm pointing out an object, or I could just say that. And this word that is substantive, like it means a specific object. So if I see this one of these demonstrative pronouns by itself, it's standing in as a noun. What is that? Like that is a specific thing that I'm pointing to. So in Biblical Greek, like English, it has a near demonstrative, hutas, or something relatively close in time, space, or thought, and far demonstrative, ikainos, for something relatively distant. When a Greek demonstrative is used with a noun, it regularly stands in the predicate position. And before you think, oh no, I don't remember what predicate is, if you just see these in print enough times, you'll understand again. And we're going to review what that means. And the noun it modifies has the article. A demonstrative adjective will agree in case, number, and gender with its noun. Thus, hutas halithos. So you see where I'm reading there? Hutas halithos. Or halithos hutas means what? This stone. Right. Or haute he adelphe. Or he adelphe haute. This sister. Tuto tadoron. This gift. Hadulos ikainos. that slave, ekainai hai tsukai, those souls, plural, taiploia ekaina, those boats. So again, just like when we see names, note that in English, we're not rendering that definite article. What's the definite article? What does that translate to in English? The, right. So in Greek, you'd be reading along and you say Jacobos, and it might have a definite article, ha Jacobos. But in English, you wouldn't say, the Jacob or the James. You'd just say Jacob or James.
And that goes in front of back in the Greek.
Yeah, so
Sometimes before the noun and sometimes after.
yeah, we're treating it like adjectives. Think of them like adjectives. Remember when we had adjectives, you could say the stone, the heavy one, or the stone, the big one.
Yeah.
And here we're reading the stone, the that one, or that stone. So we're treating these like adjectives. And in a moment, we're going to look at a number of sentences where you see them in their relative places. So when a demonstrative stands alone, it is a pronoun. So just like what I was saying, what is that? That is standing alone, and it's itself a pronoun. It will agree in gender and number with its antecedent, and it functions in the sentence. Its function in the sentence will determine the case. English idioms will sometimes require the expression of the implied noun. So let's look at a couple examples of these. Hutas genoske ton kurion. Hutas genoske ton kurion. So in English, we're translating that as this man. Which word are we translating as this man in that sentence? Yep. Hutas. Why is hutas this man? It's masculine, exactly. So hutas means this. And if I'm just saying hutas genoske, it's this man knows. Tonkurion. I just realized as I was reading here, I got a word mixed up. When I was saying that a demonstrative agrees with its predicate, that I meant to say antecedent. That word that it stands in for. Sorry, I got some of my vocabulary mixed up. So, hutas genoske. This man knows Tan Kurion. This man knows the Lord. What about blepomen tautain? So blepomen means what? See. So o ace a amen ete use we see blepomen tautain. Now, why is it translating that as we see this woman? Right, it's got that ain ending. So that's a singular feminine ending. We see this woman. Hutoi hutoi pistuosin. These men, or these people, these persons, believe. Ikaine didaskusi toteknon. Those women are teaching that child. So ikainai, we don't see the word gunai, so we don't see woman in there. But ikainai, it's got that feminine ending. Ikain, that's the far demonstrative beginning. Ikainai, those women, didaskusi toteknon, are teaching that child. Or, excuse me, are teaching the child. Not that child, the child. Metatauta pempe ekainos angelon. So, metatauta, so after these, or after these things, pempe ekainos angelon. Now, why is it translating it as that man sends a messenger? Look at that sentence. Metatauta, after these things, pempe ekainos. Why is it that man sends? Yeah, ekainos. Yeah, so ekainos. And what case is that in? Ekainos. Singular masculine. And what's the case? Look at the ending. Nominative, right. So os. So it's that man sends, and then angelon, so that's that word messenger. And what case is that in? Look at the ending. Accusative, right. So after these things, that man sent the messenger. So these endings are important, right? I keep telling you that you need to be paying attention to them. And if you just are reading the text over and over and over again, and if you're just listening to me read it as well as you're reading it, and maybe listen to it while you're in the car, listen to it running, you'll do two things. One, you'll rack up my views on YouTube. Two, you will learn them. You'll soak them in. You'll metabolize them passively. Your brain is a very good passive learner. Children are not learning languages the way I'm teaching it to you right now. They just learn it by absorbing it. And if you just continually expose your brain to the sounds of these endings, you're going to associate os, with the nominative, or o with the dative, on with the accusative, and you're not even going to think about it. So the only way to really do that is to continually subject your brain to it. Okay, so enough about that. Any questions on that so far? All right, well, let's go on. You've seen this word before, autos. What is autos? Yeah, he, or him, depending on the case. What would be him? Right, yeah, auto or auton, depending on the case. So there's a couple ways now. We're moving on a little bit to this word autos. Just some special uses of it. Here's how you've seen it in the past, or regular use of it. Didasco auton. So didasco with that ending. I teach him. And in your sentences so far, this is how you've been using this word, auton. But as we'll see, we can also use this word in the same way that, when I say ego lego, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean I speak, but ego lego, what does that mean? I myself speak. Why is that? Because Lego by itself means I speak, and that word ego is redundant. But when I put ego Lego, I am speaking emphatically. I myself speak. Or if I were to say ego my Lego, or Lego my ego, what does that mean? Yeah, I myself, me speak. I don't know. It doesn't exactly translate, but Lego my ego is actually in Greek. So, we're doing the same thing with autos here, and auton, autu, auto, autos. What we're doing here is that if you introduce this word, when you don't technically need it, it's going to be emphatic. He himself. In the same way that I'd say I myself, now I'm saying he himself or she herself. So here's just an example sentence of that. I teach autos de ukakue. Now, I don't need to say autos de. I could just say didasco ukakue. What would that mean? I teach, but he does not listen. But if I say autos de, I'm saying, but he himself does not listen. And in this English, we would typically put it in italics, and that's why it's translating it as I teach, but he does not listen. I'm putting it in italics. Or we could say I teach, but he himself does not listen. So we're going to start using this word autos that you've seen before in different ways. All right. So I want to run through this chart right here on page 44, which is starting to take everything that I just talked about, and we'll see it all laid out in a very systematic way. And we'll see some ways that we can use these words. So to review, and before I really get into this, I want to make a note just to emphasize that you really do not need to worry about memorizing all of these rules and all of these grammatical constructions. I want to teach them to you, and when you do the homework, you'll be seeing lessons in which there'll be those other guys on YouTube that are teaching you the same thing that I just taught you. And I want you to hear that, and I want you to read it in the book. But when it comes to practicing them practically, that practice doesn't entail you reviewing the rules again and reading the rules over and over again, trying to memorize the rules. How do you practice? Well, you simply read, copy, write, listen, and you're going to soak it up. And when you see them in context over and over again, you're going to intuitively understand what the text means. Just in the same way that when you start reading through John 1 through 4, you're probably able to do that pretty quickly now without really stopping and parsing it out. And just trust that your brain will do the same thing with what we're learning today. So let's look at, I just said that we don't need to worry about memorizing the rules, but let's look at the rules right now just so we can talk about this technically. Okay, so when we talked about adjectives, there were those two main positions. So it's that attributive adjective and the predicate adjective, these different positions that we could put the adjectives in. So what was the attributive? We're using the adjective to talk about an attribute of that object. So, ha hagios artos, literally, the holy bread, or ha artos ha hagios, the bread, the holy one, or the holy bread. What was the predicate? How is predicate different? Well, we're not talking about the attribute of the object. Instead, we're saying something about it. So, hagios ha-artos, holy is the bread. Or ha-artos hagios, the bread holy. The bread is holy, is how we would render it in English. Those are the two different positions. And so now we'll see that our demonstratives and our use of the word autos are be falling in a similar position. So I had read when I was reading from the book that the demonstratives typically take the predicate position. So now here, if you're looking at this chart, you can see that. So what was the predicate? Hagios ha artos. The bread is holy. Now look at how the near demonstrative is being used. Hutos ha hagios, or ha artos hutos. In the same way you see in the adjective hagios ha-artos or ha-artos hagios. It's the same word order. But instead, with the adjective, we're saying the bread is holy, but when we're using this near demonstrative, it's the holy bread. Same thing with the far demonstrative. Same word, different words, same positioning. Okay, I'm going to talk for a couple more moments. And if this is confusing you, don't worry about it. We're about to just see this in print and a bunch of examples. Is your hand up? Sure. Yeah.
Where does the is?
It's implied. In Greek, they're not going to put it there, but in English, we will. Because in English, I'm not going to say the bread holy. And maybe if I'm a child learning how to speak, I'll say the bread holy. But in English, we don't speak that way. You gotta, the word is implied.
We know when to add a word.
Context and how to know technically, memorize these rules. How to know intuitively, just read it over and over again. And if you spend your time in the text reading it, you'll know. Because if you put the word is in there, it'll make sense. If the word is not in there, then it won't make sense. If the word is not in there, you'll be reading the bread holy. Well, that doesn't make sense. The bread is holy. Okay, so I talked about using this word autos in a way that is similar to using that that personal pronoun in a sense that is a little bit repetitive or redundant. So I myself speak. So here's two ways that we can use this word autos in a similar way. So autos ha-artos. So he the bread, or the bread he, we would translate that as the bread itself. In the same way that I would say, I myself am speaking, now we're seeing this, the bread itself, this sort of emphatic, intensive use of the word. And then there's one other way that we can use it, and that is the identical autos. So right here we have autos ha artos. Is that an attributive adjective or a predicate adjective position? Yeah, so attributive, ha-hagios artos, or ha-artos ha-hagios, that's the attributive. Predicate, hagios ha-artos, or ha-artos hagios. It's the predicate. So when I'm using this word autos in the predicate position, it is intensive. If I'm using it in the attributive position, it's this identical. Right. So this is one of those. This is one of those examples of this rule's going to sound confusing because I'm just giving you the technical explanation of it. But when you see it in print, it makes sense. So look again here at this use of the adjective. What's the attributive position? Ha artos. Excuse me. Ha hagios artos, or ha artos ha hagios. That's the holy bread, or the bread, the holy one. That's attributive. Now we look down here at these different uses of autos. Ha autos artos. That's this attributive position. Or ha artos ha autos. So rather than saying the holy bread, we're saying the same bread. I know that sounds confusing because when you explain grammar rules in this very technical fashion, it doesn't jive because that's not how we pick up language. So what we're going to do now is look at these in a whole bunch of sentences, and as we read through the sentences, it'll make sense. Okay. Before we do that, let's get into. Yeah, I really don't want you to fret over looking at this and trying to say, okay, is that attributive position or is that predicate position? Just read the text over again, listen to it, compare it with the English translation, and you'll intuitively know what it means, just like you've been doing for the first 4 chapters or so, where you don't really stop and think about it, but you just know it. Okay. I want to go through the vocabulary, new vocabulary that we're going to learn. There's a couple of these words that you're not going to see until Zhang chapter 10, but I'll go ahead and teach them anyway because this is the order that the book is teaching them. Croy is going to give them to you in lesson 8, but you might not see them until you're reading Zhang 10, which you'll see before the summer. So, allos means other. I don't know what this word means. Allomorph, I've never seen that before. I guess it means other shape. Well, I guess is because if you know Greek, you can read these crazy scientific words. Allomorph, allos, other. Apostello, I send. That's an easy one to know. What's an apostle? A disciple is a student of Jesus. An apostle is someone that he has sent out. When do the 12 disciples become the 12 apostles? After he sends them. Apostello means I send. So that should be a pretty easy one to remember. Apostello, I send.
Are the same thing?
Yeah, so Pempo could be, it's a good question. So according to just this quick English gloss, they're going to be synonyms. If you were to dive into an actual lexicon with a whole page entry, then it could probably tell you the nuances. My guess would be, and this is just my guess without digging into the BDAG, which is the big standard Greek lexicon. It would be what's this prefix here? Apo. Yeah, from. So my guess would be the difference between Pempo and Apostella would be Pempo is just I send a letter, I send a text, whatever. But Apostello probably has this little bit more emphatic sense of sending away, or preparing and then sending, would be my guess. But yeah, you'd have to dive into a lexicon to see what all the nuances are. Yeah. So autos, this is the one that we have seen already as that he or her. But in the sense that we've been reading it now, it's, he himself or the same. So what's this word automatic? What does that mean? What does automatic mean? Automatic transmission. Yeah, does it itself. Autonomous. Autonomy. This is the word autos that we were just talking through. It means self. So we used it as the pronoun before, but now we're using it to mean self or same. Baptizo, baptize. You can learn that one. Agero means to raise up. This is what Jesus does as he raises from the dead. He raises up. Eirene means peace. I remember when I was learning Greek the first time, I thought about uh, someone named Erin, and she's very tranquil. She's very peaceful. Eirene. I don't know. That worked for me. Eirene means peace. When Jesus says, "My peace I give to you." Yeah.
My name was Irene. I always knew that meant peace.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, excellent. So you've already got this one. Ekainos, that's that far demonstrative. Exousia means authority. When people ask Jesus, by what authority do you do these things? Exousia. That's the word they're using. This is my favorite new word that you're learning right now. Heurisco. Remember, so we've got this diphthong here, epsilon, upsilon, and whenever you see a diphthong, where does the rough breathing mark go? Second letter, but you're still pronouncing it in the beginning. So we've got heurisco. Who knows the story of Archimedes and learning about discovering how to measure the density of gold? Anyone know this story? Okay, so Archimedes, he's this ancient Greek scientist, natural philosopher, as they would have called it in the day, and the king knows him as a learned man, and the king has this crown, and the king says, Archimedes, you're a wise man. I want you to determine if this crown is made of gold or not. Now, they already knew how to do this. How do you determine if something is made of gold? Well, you measure its volume, its length, its width, its height, calculate its volume, and then weigh it. And if you know its weight and you know its volume, then you can determine its density. And if you know its density, then you know if it's true gold or not. Just based off of, oh, it looks like gold and it has the same density of gold, therefore it's gold and not fool's gold or pyrite or something else. But what's the problem with this crown? You can't take all these measurements on this crown because it's a complex object. The king doesn't want him to cut a piece off of it and melt it down into a cube. He certainly doesn't want him to melt the whole crown into a cube so he can measure its volume. So he gives him this highly complex object and he says, determine if this is gold. From anyone from middle school science, do you know how he did it? So Archimedes, he's like, I don't know how to do this problem. And he goes and he gets in his bathtub where he does all of his best thinking and he sinks into his bathtub. And as he sinks into his bathtub, he watches the water overflow over the top. And he stands up and he shouts out, what does he shout? Eureka! Which is a different tense than we've learned. So this word here, heurisco, means I find, but eureka would mean I have found, which you'll learn that tense later. You don't know it yet. I have found it. Well, what's the solution? Well, if you put something in water, it displaces the identical volume. You measure the volume of that water, that's the same volume as the object that you put into it. So now he knows the volume, he knows the weight, and he can determine if that crown was gold or not. And so when he discovers it, sits in the water, it displaces, he stands up and says, Eureka! I have found it. That's how you're going to remember this as Eureka.
During the gold rush would yell, they found gold, right?
Sure, yeah, Eureka, yeah, exactly, same. So, I don't expect you to know this word heuristic, but heurisco, I find. So, crino, here's this other word, I judge. What's a critic? What's a film critic? Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean they criticize, but what does a film critic do? They judge the films, yeah. Or if you're talking about a critical text, textual criticism, judging the base components of the text. So crino means to judge. I judge. Laos means people, but like a crowd of people. So if you're talking about the laity, the church laity, you're talking about the church people. Laos. Here's a word that you'll see a lot, un. This is therefore or consequently, and sometimes you'll see it translated as then. So remember the word day, delta epsilon. What does that mean? Yeah, it doesn't really translate exactly into English, but we'll typically translate it as but or and it's called a post-positive word. What does that mean? Do you remember?
Next sentence.
Right, it's in the next word or two in the sentence. Even though we might translate the sentence as but he walked, but we would see that word in Greek as coming after the first word in the sentence. That means it's post-positive. And we'll see the same thing with this word un. It's post-positive, meaning it'll appear next in the sentence. Hutas, aute, tuto, this, the near demonstrative. We already covered that. Hutos means thus or so. Once you see it in context, that'll make sense. Hutos, thus, so. And finally, this word prosopon. That means your face. So when we talk about seeing God's face, or no one has seen God's face and lived, this is the word prosopon, that face. All right. So now what I want to do in the last 15 minutes is start reading through some sentences from the Zhang reader that's going to use these demonstratives, all this fancy grammar we just learned, and some of these new words. But mostly words that you have already seen before. So lesson 8. Are you getting better at reading in all caps? Yeah. Follows. Capital letters are going to come. When they originally wrote down the Greek text, so when you read your Greek text, when you finally get to reading the New Testament itself, it's nice and neat in here in these lowercase letters with their spaces and the punctuation. But in the original Greek manuscripts, when you look at manuscripts that are 1,800 years old, it's just a whole mess of capital letters. It's the translators that put them into lowercase to make them easier to read. It doesn't change the meaning, but it makes it a lot prettier to look at. So right here we got Paulus, so Paul, baptize Philemona, Philemon. That's what lesson 8 is about. That'll be Logos Beta, the second one, all the way down here. But this first story that we're going to read has nothing to do with Paul and Philemon. This is now. I want to give you a forewarning. When I read this book for the first time, this story confused the HE double hockey stick out of me. And the reason is because these near and far demonstratives, hutos, ikainos, they're very common words. You'll see them a lot. However, this particular story uses them in an extremely abnormal quantity. Just so you can see all the different uses, you would never see them in this high density. This is probably the highest density Greek text you'll ever see that has demonstratives in it. So it's a little, it's not confusing, but it sounds a little bit awkward. And it is awkward because it is not authentic in the sense that no Greek author would actually write this way. And I just remember the first time I read this thinking like, what is this? So that's what's going on here. All right, so Logos Alpha. What is that? Like this story alpha. So like Logos is such a flexible word, but in this context, we're talking the words alpha, that's story alpha. Ioannes lege peri oikon. What does that mean? Here's one of those words that we got from the last chapter. Peri. Remember, from like perimeter. So one sense of peri is, around, physically around, but it can also mean, when used with a genitive, Ioannes lege peri oikon. About or concerning. Either one is correct. About can mean spatially, but concerning is specifically abstract. So most Greek translators would probably say concerning, but if you want to say about, that works too. Ioannis lege peri oikon. John is speaking about houses. Ioannis, John says, blepo oikus kalous en Jerusalem. Blepo, I see oikus, houses, plural. How do you know it's plural? Us, right? And then what case is that? Os, u, o, on, oi, on, ois, us. Yeah, accusative, plural. I see houses, not just houses, but oikus kalous. I see beautiful houses and Jerusalem. I see beautiful houses in Jerusalem. Allah, but ha oikos mu, my house, ha oikos mu hutas. Oh, there's that new word. Which demonstrative is that? This, near demonstrative. So, Allah, ha oikos mu hutas. So, literally, let's read it literally. But the house of me, this. How would you render that in good, smooth English? Yeah. But this house of mine. All right, so here's that first instance. Allah ha'oikas mu hutas. But this house of mine, ukalas. Right. Is not good. So let's just take a quick look over at this word hutas here. What's the ending of that? It's masculine, os, singular, nominative. Right, so gender, number, case. And which word is this? What is the antecedent of this word? That is, what is the word that this demonstrative pronoun is referencing? Oikos. Right. And so we see oikos, nominative, masculine, singular, hutas, nominative, masculine, singular. They're always gonna match. So sometimes, as you know, as I've said before, word order in Greek is a little bit fluid, but when you know the endings and you know the cases, the gender and the number, then your brain will put them together into the appropriate English meaning. So because this word order doesn't matter, this word hutas could go here, it could go up here, you could probably put it over here and it would still make sense. Okay. Allah ha'oikas mu hutas ukalas. But this house of mine is not beautiful. Allah kakos, kai mikros. But it is small and ugly, or it is ugly and small. So what is he going to do about it? Fellow un. All right, so what does that word un mean? That's a new word I just told you. Un. Therefore. And it's post-positive, meaning it shows up just after that first word. In the same way we see day right here. We've got this word day. We always see it coming after or after the first word or after the second word as well. That happens. So, fellow un, therefore I desire. Not I desire, therefore. I guess you could say that. It would make sense. But therefore I desire. Ekain. How do you know it's to have? Infinitive, right? Ain ending. Therefore, I desire to have tous oikus ikainus. Those houses, far demonstrative, ikainus. I desire to have those houses in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem. Therefore, I desire to have those houses in Jerusalem. Engar. For in tois oikus ikain, tois oikois, sorry, tois oikois ikainos. This is an excellent example of Greek poetry. Greek poetry plays around with the sound of words. So we've got engar tois oikois ikainos. Has a lyrical sound to it. Engar tois oikois ikainos. For in those houses estin artos agathos.
Good.
It's good bread. It was beautiful bread. Yeah. Therefore, I desire to have those houses in Jerusalem, for in those houses is good bread. Ego de uk echo, but I myself don't have. Right? He could say, uk echo, I don't have, or uk de echo, but I don't have. But he's saying ego de uk echo, but I myself don't have. You see where don't is coming from? Uk, don't. But I myself don't have arton, agathon, ento, oiko, mu, tuto. All right. But I don't have beautiful bread, good bread in this house of mine. All right. So you see how, as we were talking through the rules of these demonstrative pronouns, it sounded a little bit confusing, and you're like, what is this? But when you see it in print, it starts to make sense. But as we keep reading, we will see other uses of these demonstrative pronouns used in different ways.
Clarify.
Sure.
Tuto, that's in neutral, is that?
Yeah. So check it out. We've got dative ending here because it's got that Yoda subscript. And this is dative here as well. And if we look to, if we look to back again to the endings of these words, or excuse me, to the stem's going to change a little bit. In the nominative, it's hutas, but in everything else, genitive, dative, accusative, it's tuto, tutu, tuto, tuton. Yeah. So this word here, tuto, is in the dative. Therefore, the stem is no longer hutas. It's tuto. And it's, therefore, I do not have good bread in this house of mine. Yeah. Got 5 more minutes. Let's just go a little bit farther before we call it quits. Ioannes un. So therefore John, treke. That's runs, yeah. Pros tous oikus ikainus in Jerusalem. Therefore John runs towards those houses in Jerusalem. Hoide anthropoi en tois oikos ikainois. But the people, or the men, or the people in the houses, in those houses, blepusin, they see Ioannein, kai legusin peritu anthropu tutu Ioannou. So this is what I'm talking about, like, we got a near demonstrative here, near demonstrative here. It's just an abnormal number of them. You wouldn't see that in a Greek, in a real Greek text. So it sounds a little bit awkward, and that's because it is. Hoide anthropoi en tois ikainois, excuse me, en tois oikois ikainois, but the men in those houses blepusin Ioannein, see John, kai legusin, and they speak concerning to anthropu tutu Ioannou. They speak concerning this man, John. Hoi anthropoi, tis estin ha anthropos ekainos. Who is that man? You see that? Tis estin. Who is ha anthropos ekainos? Who is that man? Uk estin ha anthropos ha apotes eremu ekaines. So let's take this apart a little bit. We're looking at the end and we see this. What does this mean? It's a question mark, right? So we know this is a question. Uk estin. And if we're starting a question with uk estin, what is that? How would I say that in English? Yeah, isn't. Yeah, isn't this or isn't that? So isn't this or isn't ha'anthropos? Oh, isn't he is ha'anthropos, the man, ha'apotes erimu ikaines. So remember when we're using when we're using adjectives, we can say the dog, the big one, or in this instance, we're saying the man, the from the that desert one. So if we're thinking this is an adjective, what would be the adjective here? Apo tes erimu ekaines. Isn't this the man, the anthropos, the from the that desert one? I know I'm this English, the way I'm speaking it doesn't make sense, but I'm just trying to do it literally. Does this make sense? So how would I put this into smooth English? Um, uh, isn't he isn't he the man from that desert, or is he not the man from the desert? The man, the from that desert. Make sense? Uk estin ha anthropos ha apotes erimu ekaines. Just out of curiosity, I want to see how Mark Zhang actually translates this sentence. How does he do it? Isn't he the person from that desert? Is how he says it. Isn't he the person from that desert? Ukestin ha anthropos ha apotes erimu ekaines. All right, so we're out of time, so I'll go ahead and stop there. Everyone who's just listening to this recording, good luck with this material. You'll do fine. I believe in you.